This is absolutely ridiculous as some shocking new reports have dropped surrounding one player that we're all familiar with, linking him to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to break down this ridiculous report and rumor and discuss, of course, what this would mean going forward. But not only that, some interesting other things that has fans very intrigued. A ton to go over today, folks. Before we get into it all, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support is unbelievable. So thank you guys for that. About 71% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed. Darius, this one's going to be an interesting one to say the least, and some interesting things and rumblings have started to occur naturally for one of the best players we've ever seen and the best player in the NHL. When his contract is nearing its end, rumors are going to start to fly, but you can see this here. And NHL rumors, ex-Leafs enforcer Jay Rosehill links Connor McDavid to Toronto and believes that Connor McDavid would be interested in joining the Leafs if it got to that point. And of course, we're going to be talking about that because A, he's yet to commit to the Edmonton Oilers full time. B, bit of a, I don't want to say a disaster class in management, but some interesting moves and some interesting decisions thus far this offseason, especially even dating back to the qualifying offers last year, all these different things. Now, we did have Frank Saravalli come out and say there isn't a reason to panic in Edmonton, even though Connor McDavid has yet to sign an extension. So take that with a grain of salt. Also, I mean, Frank Saravalli, he's been wrong a lot. So maybe when he's saying that, that means he will leave Edmonton. We'll, of course, have to see there. But Darius, this is interesting. Jay Rosehill's saying that Connor McDavid would be interested in playing with Toronto. He's a former, of course, NHL player. Does he have more intel than, reporters? Probably not. But it makes for an interesting conversation, and that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did a video on Connor McDavid to the Leafs a while ago, a couple months ago, and we were joking about it. But I think it's getting a little bit more real, not just for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but other teams around the league, because Connor McDavid at this point, we are well into August and he hasn't signed an extension yet. And I ask why? Because he's eligible to, he can. It's up to him, basically, and they have not signed an extension yet. Now, I do see him possibly signing an extension in Edmonton, but I don't see it being a long-term extension. I think it's like 2-3 years, something like that, where it's kind of like a prove it to management, like, please build me a team that can win the Stanley Cup, because him and Draisaitl have been willing that team to win the last couple of years, because on paper, they're not that skilled, right? I think there's better teams on paper, again, around the league, but I think it's very interesting, and it's starting to heat up a little bit. Connor McDavid basically went to his management and said, find me a goalie, please, and build me a team. And they've done none of that. And they let two of their best young players walk to St. Louis last offseason via offer sheet. I would lose a little bit of trust in management if something like that happened, because, St. Louis signed those guys to very minuscule contracts, and Edmonton could have done that. And they let them walk, and now they're great players. Holloway is almost a point-a-game player in this league. So, and he's going to be taking more steps forward. So I would lose a little bit of faith. So it's very interesting. The Leafs are in a situation where they could absolutely, with the rising cap, make some moves to make an offer to Connor McDavid. Would he want to come to Toronto? That's obviously the biggest question here. I'm not so sure about that. I do wonder if he looks at other options around the league. I do wonder if he looks at New York and playing for the Rangers, because they do have the best goaltender in the league for my money, but the Leafs do have some goaltending as well. So I think it's getting very interesting. I think Brad Treliving would be all over that if it got to that point. And listen, Nick, I mean, we're heading into September at this point. We're heading into the next season starting. Connor McDavid does not have a contract extension in place yet. I ask why.
Yeah, and I'm showing you some screenshots and everyone watching. June 19th, note the date. If I feel there's a good window to win here over and over again, then signing is no problem. That was, June. So we're approaching 2 months ago now, a few days away from being 2 months ago where he said that. And there hasn't been much action on the, Oilers front. And that does beg the question, can he win consistently in Edmonton? Can he win at all in Edmonton? We've seen some Stanley Cup appearances, all these different things. The team is interesting now, definitely different now. And I don't know if I was Connor McDavid, if I would rather have much faith either in continuously winning. I think that's what McDavid wants to do. And there's been some rumblings. You can see here, we're hearing the contract extension for McDavid will most likely happen after the Team Canada orientation camp. So keep an eye out for late August. I mean, there's a lot of, rumblings. This guy, 2 Months Hockey Podcast, take it with a grain of salt if you want to believe it or not. We're just presenting the information. We know from the Oilers' perspective, they came out and said that McDavid is their number one priority, which is interesting because number one priority 2 months in, to the offseason here, he still has yet to, or over 2 months in, but he still has yet to sign. And from the Leafs perspective, I mean, all in, obviously, like talking about McDavid going to Leafs, he would fit perfect. He would fit every team perfectly. And one of the issues is, let's say he does hit the open market. I think the Leafs would be right there among the top suitors, both when it comes to cap space. You mentioned, the Rangers and some other teams as well. One of the bigger also questions will be every single team in the NHL, whether they have cap space or not, they're going to inquire about, or to Connor McDavid about getting him. And that's what makes things interesting. But I'd be lying if I didn't admit the Leafs have probably as good of a chance, if not a better chance, than I think anyone if he ultimately hits the open market.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, he would fit like a glove into any team around the league, and every team I'm sure would be interested. So obviously, Brad Treliving would make a big push at that. But I think it's very interesting, and they're saying that Connor McDavid for the Edmonton Oilers and their management is the number one priority. For me, I mean that makes sense, of course, but for me, their number one priority should be getting a goalie. I don't understand why they haven't gotten a number one goalie. So again, I think the Leafs can offer that. Like, hey, look at what we've built here. You can play with Austin Matthews as well, and then obviously we have a decor. We're built to win right now. That's what we can offer you, right? And if you sign long term, we want to compete over and over and over again. You got guys like Matthew Nyes, who are going to be great players, right, as he continues to develop in this league. So I think it's going to get very interesting. Doesn't have a contract extension. Some people are suggesting that it's going to be late August, right? If late August comes and he doesn't sign right into the new year, I think that's very interesting. And one thing here is, yes, they've gone to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, right? But I was listening to something that Draymond Green was saying on a podcast, which is a little weird. Let's take it to basketball for a second. He was talking about how you can be in the NBA final. You can win 3 rounds and be in the NBA final. And he was talking about, I think specifically against the Raptors, ironically enough, when the Toronto Raptors won the NBA championship. And he said you could be in the NBA final and maybe win a game, but not be close to winning the championship. And I feel like the Oilers 2024, they were closer, but this past season, the Florida Panthers beat them, right? Like they weren't that close to winning a Stanley Cup. So I think McDavid's taking that into account. A lot of people say that the Toronto Maple Leafs, let's be real for a second, we're closer to a cup. You won one playoff round, right? You were in the second round. So you want to take a step to get there. Adding the best player in the world would definitely be a step in the right direction. So I thought that was interesting too. I feel like a lot of this is going through McDavid's mind, and he's like, do I want to return home? We don't know. We don't know, right? I feel like the situation would have to present itself, but I think that the Leafs can offer a really good team that is built, at least on paper, better than the Edmonton Oilers at this point in time. But obviously, it's a mental shift, a mental switch that has to happen, which I feel like we're moving towards heading into this new season. So I think that there could be a fit there, and I think it's going to get really interesting. The longer he goes without a contract, I'm raising more and more question marks.
Yeah, and obviously Jay Rosehill basically said that he knows Toronto would be involved. He thinks that they would make an offer. Everyone would make an offer. It's less about that, but it's more about hearing it already. And obviously, multiple reports have come out that the Oilers GM is optimistic. We've heard some reports that it'll be a shorter deal, which we can revisit this conversation in 2 years, 3 years if he signs a short-term deal. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. I'm not going to ask you guys if you want McDavid. Everybody wants McDavid. It's not super surprising that he's already been linked to the Leafs by. It's not just Jay Rosehill has been linked to for years now, really, just with the natural
since the beginning.
Yeah, since the beginning by the natural link. Let us know. Do you think it's a possibility? Do you think it's going to happen? It's obviously a pretty far-fetched possibility because he is the best player in the NHL. But the Oilers are doing the Leafs and every other team a favor by failing to make an actual good team heading into next season, or at least fix the holes that they had following last year. But let us know what your thoughts are. See you later.